Hey everyone, this is part two of the backwards tumbling training camp. And that's exactly how far we've gotten in this tutorial. If you missed part one, go do it now. Come back when you've gotten the first two active poses. As you can see here, I selected the second pose, clicked it, then just use Control C, Control V to copy paste that pose. Then I slid it over. What I'm doing now is locking the fingertips, the wrists, and the upper arms, the head, and the chest using control and right click to make it so that when I move the rest of the spine forward, they won't move. And what we're doing now is we're making a pose that will get the character from their hands past their feet. I call this pose pike down because the character is basically piking down from kind of an off balance handstand position. All you do is rotate the spine forward. My character is really flexible, so I don't use the full extent. And yeah, I made it a little bit too rounded. So I'm just clearing that up. Once the spine is rounded forward as much as you want, you just have the feet come up and point towards the sky. Using multiple viewpoints helps you get your pose symmetrical and just kind of want to line everything up. And if you don't want a part of the body to move, you just control right click it. Feel perfectly free to use multiple viewpoints to really make sure that the character is symmetrical, everything's in line. If you can't use the different viewports, just rotate the character as much as you can. And notice how the character's chest and arms are in a straight line, and they're in the same exact line as they were in the arch pose, and that's why we just copy paste the arch pose and then edit it. So that way the arms stay in line, and when we actually simulate, they won't do this really awkward thing where they try to move from one position to another. And the character usually ends up landing on their head for a little bit, and it takes away a lot of the power. If you just have the character's arms stay in the same exact position from the jumping pose, the jumping arch pose, to the pushing off the ground pike down pose, they'll get more power and the scene will just look better, not quite so awkward. And I'm just squaring up the spine here, making sure that everything's in a straight line. Using left view is very good to see if you have a twist in the spine. And never forget the importance of the undo button up there at the top that I just clicked on. And try to keep the body as locked as possible so that you aren't going to edit parts of the body that you have finished. Now I just want to straighten the legs out, and you'll notice that the thighs and the chest and arms are pretty much parallel. The legs and the chest and arms are pretty much two parallel lines. Then I just straighten out the legs. And it took me about 6 months to figure out a good back handspring, like series of active poses and constraints. So, and this is actually the newest version that I figured out that works really well for me. So you guys are really benefiting from years of tweaking and knowledge, and I'm still working on new ways of doing it. So if you try these active poses and you think that they can work better another way, feel free to experiment and just really try to figure out what works for you and what works for your scenes. And I finished my pose and I clicked simulate. Now, the problem with this is that the pike down active pose was coming way too soon, so the character wasn't pushing off the ground. So I moved the pike down pose back a little bit. I think I also set the strength to 8 or 9. And this is just all about tweaking, because what we want the character to do is push off the ground like it does right there. And then the character should, again, notice the hands are in front of the shoulders when they come in contact with the ground. And that, I think, is coming up off the ground a little bit too far. We want the character to flip over and not exactly flip up. Actually, this is pretty good. I'm not quite sure. I'm lowering the strength, so I clearly think it's flipping over a little bit too high. But what we want the character to do is to flip over from their hands past their feet. We want their feet to flip all the way over and end up in front of them, which is what they're doing now. And also, notice how the character's feet are very far in front of their hips. And these are the 3 active poses that you need for all of your backwards tumbling and endorphin. Just these 3. All the backwards tumbling scenes that I make, just use 3 poses. And then a few other poses when I get to the big tricks. But notice again how the character flips in the first tutorial from their feet past their hands and onto their chest. We want this character now to flip from their hands, from an off-balance position on their hands, all the way over and past their feet and onto their back. And this is actually a drill that they do in real life gymnastics for making your backwards tumbling more powerful. You just want to flip past. Yeah, frame by frame. Again, the hands are behind, the shoulders are behind the hands. I'm going to say that 18 times. I'm just going to say that repeatedly. That's what you need to focus on. Getting the hands in front of the shoulders and then making sure that you get the feet in front of the